The EU and Tunisia sign a $1 billion strategic partnership deal. 110 million of it will be dedicated specifically to tackling illegal migration. The EU says it's a blueprint for future deals, but others say it will exacerbate a human rights disaster and fail to stop the thousands of people trying to reach Europe. I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is the EU-Tunisia deal. Tunisia and the European Union have signed a highly anticipated memorandum of understanding. Tunisia, suffering an economic crisis, will cooperate on curbing the flow of migrants to Europe's Mediterranean shores. In exchange, they'll receive millions of dollars in aid for various projects. Now, the leaders of Italy, the Netherlands, and the European Commission met with President Kais Saied in Tunis last week, where they celebrated the agreement as a model for future deals.
We will work with Tunisia on an anti-smuggling operational partnership. We will also increase our coordination on search and rescue operations. And we agreed that we will cooperate on border management, anti-smuggling, return and addressing root causes in full respect of the international law. For this, we will make available more than 100 million euros of EU funding.
Let me emphasize that the central aim of this partnership is to help ensure economic growth, jobs, and also future prospects for Tunisia. The EU at this moment is already Tunisia's biggest foreign investor and trading partner. But there's a lot of potential to do even more. For example, in the green energy and in the digital transitions.
The partnership with Tunisia has to be considered as a model for building new relations with North African neighbors.
But international law experts and humanitarian groups are less than happy about the deal. In recent months, migrants in Tunisia have faced attacks due to an increasingly hostile environment. That is in part due to the president's own comments. He claims migrants are partaking in a plot to change Tunisia's demographics. On Tuesday, the bodies of 5 migrants were recovered in a desolate area near the border between Libya and Tunisia. Dozens of sub-Saharan migrants have been stranded in the area for weeks after Tunisian authorities rounded them up and moved them there from the port city of Sfax. Well, critics say Tunisia does not subscribe to European values and that the EU has made a mistake in signing this deal. Meanwhile, migrants just want help.
No food, no water. They materialize us here, they brutalize us, there are snakes here, nowhere to sleep, nothing to eat. We are begging on the new end to please come to our aid. We are suffering here brutally. Look at our skin have been infected with different infections, no treatment, no food. They have been maltreating us maliciously.
As we try to enter the Tunis again, they now beat us badly. They now broke this my hand, or my head. They now tear it. That's what happened. We need the government to help us. We are in the desert now for 7 days, sir. For 7 days, please.
Well, one activist who understands very well the mistreatment of migrants at the hands of authorities is Salam Aldeen. He is the founder of the NGO Team Humanity, and he joins me now. Salam, thanks so much for being with us. You really have seen it all, because you're also a rescue and aid worker yourself. You were even arrested by Greek authorities for saving migrants at sea. So tell us first what you think these migrants are going through now in Tunisia.
I believe they're going through hell. Can you imagine being alone in the desert without water, without food? You have your children with you and no help to come. I really believe they're going through the worst of the worst.
And you're seeing, these countries that are supposed to be the beacons of human rights respond this way. You have witnessed arguably the cruelest aspects then of how the EU, and I'll put in quotes, manages migration. You've tried to call it out, yet here we are now hearing experts warn that migrants could be at greater risk of abuse through this agreement that's just been finalized. So what worries you most about the EU making a deal like this with a country like Tunisia, and the fact that they're saying this is going to be a model to scale even larger?
They made a deal with Libya, and it failed. You see more and more people coming, more boats are coming, more people are dying. So what is the difference between the deal with Libya and now Tunisia? I think the deal with Tunisia is going to be worse than Libya. And I believe that it's not going to help anything in any matter. I still believe people will come. I still believe people will suffer. And I believe that they will suffer much more than before this deal.
Explain why. Why is this deal with Tunisia going to be worse than a deal with a country like Libya, who is effectively actually still at war?
You see, the money will never get anywhere near that will help the refugees that comes to Tunisia to get out in their boats or whatever it is. I believe that the deal with Tunisia will just put people more in risk, in much more risk. I believe that this is not the solution at all. The solution is use the money, instead of giving to Tunisia, use it in the country of those refugees, where they're coming from, to find the solution there, and not to give money to somewhere to stop them, because the migration will never stop as long as they are suffering in their own countries.
Okay, so how do you do that? We need to understand if there is a solution at the source of the problem, if the EU could be spending money there to stop it at the source, as they have suggested so many times before, why is that not being done? Is it because of less cooperative partners on the ground in, for example, certain West African countries where many of these migrants are originating from?
I believe corruption. I believe it's maybe something have to do with corruption in those countries. Let's say the migrants from Africa, maybe some countries they don't trust, but they made already deals with Libya and Tunisia, so how can you trust those countries? And you cannot trust the Africans. There should be a solution. They should go there and help those people. Let's say there is, let's say people are in poverty. Let's say countries without the war, just poverty. Go and fix the issue. Go and fix the problem.
But how do you do that? I mean, there are governments in place. You can't just have a European country go over to these countries and say, hey, if you're not going to make their lives better, we will. We're going to do your jobs for you. How is that supposed to work?
So they're supposed to help this country. They're not going to just come to this country and take over. They should cooperate and say, okay, let's do something that will improve the people's life in your country. Let's say you have a poverty, let's open some factories. Use that money instead of giving to countries. Use that money to improve the conditions in the country. Let's say open factories, open schools, education. There's so many things you can do with those money that you use to stop people coming. Because no matter what, you will not stop migration as long as people suffering in their own countries. Because nobody wants to leave their countries if it's good to live there.
Understood. But Salam, do you think they also, we know their conditions are not ideal in the countries that they're coming from, but do you think they actually understand how bad the conditions will be on the journey to try to get to a better life? Do they understand they can die in the worst way?
I believe the migrants know that 100%, but they don't have other solutions. Imagine you will have your children starving, or you will take the trip, risking your life and your children's life to get a better health. And I also believe that the EU knows what these migrants are going through, because they've seen so much evidence on it. All these boats that are coming from Libya, from Tunisia, these people are taking a chance with their lives. And
okay. Salam Aldeen, we will have to leave it there. I'd like to thank you so much for being with us on this edition of The Newsmakers. Well, let's broaden out the discussion now. And joining me from Brussels is Marco Campomenosi. He's a member of the European Parliament for Italy's right-wing Lega party. From Tunis, we have journalist Amine Snoussi. And from Copenhagen, researcher at the Danish Institute for International Studies focusing on migration and border policy, Ahlam Chemlali. Thanks all so much for being with us. Marco, I'll start with you. Why is this a good deal for Italy?
Well, we think it's important because Italy, you know very well, is facing since many years this phenomenon of immigration in the Mediterranean, and Brussels did not take care so much about this. We are not finding a solution. There is not a possibility for the economical migrants to be redistributed. And the 80–90% of the people leaving the north shore, the southern shore of Mediterranean to reach Italy is made up of economical immigrants. We think this is a first step. Of course, we need agreements also with other countries. We know how would be problematic an economic collapse of this country, because already now from Tunisia, the boats living with people are very little ones. The smugglers are not very well organized as the ones in Libya, for example, where they start with big boats. The boats starting from Tunisia does not have any equipment in order to signal their presence. This is a problem also for the fisheries, for the boats going there.
Okay.
More people leaving Tunisia, more people risk their life.
Do you accept, though,
which we have to work.
Do you accept, though, that some of the experts are saying this deal will subject innocent people to some pretty horrific abuse?
Of course, we will need to intervene, and of course we have also to intervene from the countries with the countries from which these people is starting from. We know very well even that Tunisia has a political situation which is problematic. We know everything, but we needed to intervene because anyway, people suffering, people dying in the desert is something which has happened in these last 10 years. So we need to be there. We need to share responsibility with the African countries, because if not, this is also an illusion they give to these people, and also a big business for smugglers. This is also something we want to block.
It's about a shared responsibility. Ahlam, I'll turn to you. It worries you that Italy in particular and the EU, see this deal actually as a system that can also be scaled up. It's a blueprint for the future deals, as they've said. So how bad will this get for migrants?
Well, yes, exactly. It has been presented as a template or blueprint for the future or for the region. And I think that is worrying in itself because we know that increased border control and border enforcement, which this deal is focusing on, does not stop migration. Instead, it forces migrants to take longer routes and more dangerous routes. It creates repeat businesses for smugglers, and it also results in higher risk journeys. So it's basically saying all the things that it's saying it wants to resolve. It's aggravating and enforcement, and we know this from research and from experience. And also the optics of the deal currently with Tunisia taking an authoritarian role and turn, and as well as the MOU in itself so far is vague and opaque, especially on the financial figures, which also could change according to development.
Looks like we've briefly lost Ahlam's connection. Let's try to get that back. Amine, I'll turn to you though. It's not like the EU is not aware that Kais Saied doesn't have a lot of sympathy for migrants. He actually accuses them of changing Tunisia's demographics and identity. So how is this supposed to work fairly for migrants and solve the actual problem? And would he keep non-Tunisian migrants in Tunisia anyway, or is he just looking to stop the people he cares more about from trying to go abroad?
I think the goal behind this deal is to close Tunisian borders and make it more difficult to come to Tunisia at all for migrants. And then on a second level, to close Tunisian borders with Europe and stop boats from going from the Tunisian borders to Europe and to Italy. But as you just mentioned, Said and the government have been openly anti-migration. They have put Black people in Tunisia at risk after this February statement where migrants were accused of trying to alter Tunisian demographics and changing the Muslim identity of Tunisia, which led to a lot of accusations and a lot of fake news about migrants, which led to people being abused on the streets, people being evicted from their homes. And this happened before the deal with Europe. So when people are saying, yes, we will still be looking out for human rights and we will still be looking out for basic human rights to be respected, Europe was aware of that. Europe was aware of Black people being at risk and being threatened in Tunisia, and they signed this deal knowingly and knowing quite well the situation, because researchers, experts, journalists have been covering this for months.
Ahlam, let me come back to you though, because we know that part of the issue here is that the EU has said they've been promising to institute programs that would stop irregular migration at the source, meaning in their home countries. I mean, does this deal with Tunisia resemble that at all? Or is it an anomaly? This isn't actually addressing the problems that the migrants are trying to escape in the first place.
It does not. I mean, the deal has, although it goes beyond migration, it also touches on areas like trade, investment, and green energy. Migration is still the crux of the matter. But it is essentially focusing on bolstering the security apparatus. It has a securitization approach, which is basically equipping the Tunisian Coast Guard, the National Guards, militarizing the borders, as we just heard. And that does not solve the root causes in any way. On the contrary, it bolsters, again, this security apparatus and also the concerns of Tunisia becoming a police state once again.
Marco, you know, if the EU wants to stop migrants at the countries of origin, where are the campaigns in West Africa, for example, Nigeria, Senegal? Or are those governments maybe more interested in getting more of their citizens abroad because they have, you know, large remittance economies?
No, your question is very interesting because I've seen an example from an association made up of some people in Gambia who tried to move towards Europe and they failed. And when they came back, they have made up this association, telling to their citizens, please don't try this route. You could die in the desert. You could die in the sea. So there are some ways to inform these people. And please consider also that the Italian government a few weeks ago has just presented the new project for the legal migration of 400,000 people in the next 3 years, which is a huge number, which is important, which is also taking the responsibility of the fact that we need workers and we need a certain kind of immigration. But we cannot give a message that crossing a desert and the sea is the right way to migrate to Europe. This is something important. 400,000 people could join Italy for seasonal or annual works in the coming 3 years. This is important. This means that a right-side government, as the one which is now in Italy, is taking the responsibility of this. But please remember also what I already mentioned. The economical situation of certain countries in Africa is very problematic. Of course, we need to improve our help. We need to make them more concrete, more helps that could bring stability, of course.
Right. I mean, that's exactly what our previous guest was also talking about. It's, I mean, if you can comment on that. I mean, why aren't there more solutions than at the base of the problem? And it's interesting to hear about this program Marco was referring to in Gambia, where those that had been returned because they were strictly economic migrants had started an organization to warn their brothers and sisters in the country how dangerous this route really is, to stop people from taking the kinds of economically and physically devastating routes that they'd chosen. Why aren't we seeing more of that at the countries of origin so we don't need something like this EU-Tunisia deal that's highly questionable?
Because I believe it's ineffective. I don't think there is a way of stopping migrants from searching for a better life, because if you are telling them about the danger and of the road to Europe, you are basically making them choose either you die here or you have a very risky and dangerous road that will lead you to death when you are trying to go to Europe. Basically, people would choose anyway to try and go to Europe searching for a better life, even if the chance to make it there is 1%. And I think, as your previous guest said it, actually, they are aware of the risk, they are aware of the danger, and they are trying to search for a better life because they don't have any other choice. Investing in those countries is a great idea, and of course, Europe has been saying that for years. But it shouldn't be a negotiation based on closing borders and abusing human rights. It shouldn't be a deal like EU-Tunisia or EU-Libya, as we've seen in the recent years. It should be investments made to strengthen economies without having to disregard human rights and basic rights for people.
Okay, Ahlam, then why isn't that being done? I know it's a very simplistic question, but isn't that the answer?
Well, yeah, I mean, to begin with, I just want to reiterate from research, we know very well that migrants are aware of the risks they're taking, so information campaigns are not effective. And it's very positive. I want to underline that the EU is now recognizing that they have to have legal pathways, because in essence, this is actually what can risk or reduce people from risking their lives. It's the legal pathways, and
so why? I mean, explain that. Marco was saying that there are going to be thousands of people needed to come to do seasonal work in Italy. Why isn't? Go ahead.
Yeah, that is a positive step, but we also need to scale up that exactly. And if we look at the EU deal, again, migration control and the securitization is far more focused in terms of funding and concentrated than the scale up. The recent numbers I saw in Europe with the, for instance, Erasmus program was 300 people could leave from Tunisia through this kind of program. And these numbers are small in the scale of when we talk about thousands, or if we look at the African continent, millions that are in need. And again, to criminalize or to decriminalize migration is the way forward, and legal safe pathways is the only way that we can decrease the risks that we are seeing across the Mediterranean and the Sahara as well.
Okay. Marco, sorry, Amine, go ahead.
And just to follow up on what Ahlam was saying, and I don't believe we have any other choice. As we are seeing this summer, climate change is moving very quickly, and climate migration will explode in the next years. And I don't believe there is any way in the future to control migration. And I don't believe there is a way right now. I think that the only solution is to decriminalize migration.
Okay, Marco, I just want to get your final thoughts then. I mean, decriminalizing migration, I know that is just a non-starter, of course, for especially members of a party like yours.
But please, let's remember that some of the people who arrived in Italy in the last years is increasing criminals activity in our country. This is something for which there are many social problems. There are problems because they are facing in a sort of competition based only on low salaries with legal immigrants which are living in my country and paying taxes, and the other low-income people living in my country since they were born. And this is something we have also to consider, because the pressure of these people cannot be managed.
Okay.
And this is something for which we are not criminalizing anyone, because we understand there is for everyone. But honestly, you can ask
that will have to
which
be,
is the impact.
That will have to be the final word, Marco. Sorry for having to interrupt, but that's all the time we have for this edition of The Newsmakers. Unfortunately, I'd like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with us, and our viewers, of course, for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.